Hello and welcome to Wicked Women. It is Sunday the 14th of July. I'm coming to you live from London, UK. Sad night here in the UK. England lost the Euro finals, literally with just 1 point in it. So I know there's a lot of people right now in the UK feeling very, very sad. So commiserations to the England team. So yes. Live from London, and I'm going to bring in my lovely partner coming live from Virginia. Here she is, my lovely Val.
Hello.
Hello, darling. How are you?
I'm okay. I just got to meet my newest grandkitty.
Your grandkitty?
Yeah.
I did see him earlier on, just kind of do a round the block.
Yes, that is Mr. Spider.
He
came and joined his big brother Wizard.
How's your week been?
It's been pretty good. Ups and downs.
I know the feeling. I know the feeling. Before we go into the topic, we have to say two things. One is get well, Carly. She is not feeling at all well tonight, and sadly she can't be with us. And normally Carly would drag herself in here, but she's really not feeling great. So we're kind of having to move things around slightly tonight because the three of us were coming from different angles. So Val and I are sort of juggling the pot now. So get well soon, Carly. Hopefully she'll be back next week. And also really sad news today, Val, that we lost Shannon Doherty, who, as you know, played Prue in Charmed. Yes. And we're talking about witches tonight. And I loved Charmed. It was, she was my favorite witch. Her and Piper were my favorite. And, it just kind of they made a reboot of it, which just didn't work for me. But so sad we lost her at 53.
Yeah, I mean, I liked Piper too. She was my favorite. But yeah, I loved that show. It was like one of my favorite shows ever. So
just move the hand.
And honestly, the thought of her only being, a couple years older, it's
so sad.
And kind of brings it more home.
She was in the UK recently. She was over here doing some Comic Cons and in France with oh my goodness, I've forgotten her name. Holly. Who plays Piper.
Yeah.
She was over here, and Rose McGovern, she was with her as well. The three of them were here, and I was gutted because I really wanted to get to see them. And I
don't think any of them like Alyssa.
Sadly, no, there's a lot of bad blood, I think, there. And she just started, if anyone doesn't know, there is a podcast on Instagram called The Halliwell Mansion or the Halliwell Manor, something like that. And she had just joined them.
Is the Halliwell Manor over there?
So they've got Holly there. They've got Brian, who plays Leo, and their son Chris, the guy who plays Chris, and also Rose I think has been on there as well.
Oh, I love Chris.
And Shannon had just joined it, and I'm absolutely gutted, because as a woman, that she had breast cancer, and also she was 53.
She battled cancer for a long time. She was
a warrior, and it's weird that we're talking about this subject tonight, and we lost someone who played a fantastic witch. Now, the promo was pretty long coming into Wicked Women. Normally it's a lot shorter, but I didn't want to cut out certain things when we did this topic, because we were going to talk about witches and witchcraft last October. And everything went really, really bad since that point. Henry passed away, I got sick, and everyone wasn't great, so we shelved it. And we've been kind of building up to this subject because we did A Woman's Intuition, Sacred Sex, Sexual Magic, and now Malleus Maleficarum. I can always get this. Maleficarum.
I can't say it. I'm gonna let you say it, because
Malleus Maleficarum, and What Makes a Witch. And we thought, this is a show that's going to be in 3 parts. This is part 1, and we're looking at what actually is a witch, what actually makes a witch, where do they come from, where did the name come from. And we're looking at the book, which I have to put my glasses on for this because I cannot see. We're looking at the book that began it all, the Malleus Maleficarum, which was written in 1486 by a German Catholic clergyman, and I think I could pronounce this right, Heinrich Kramer. And he put it under his Latin name of Henricus Instator. Very interesting, that Instator. And it was first published in the German city of Speyer in 1486. And some say that it's a literature of demonology of the 15th century. But he said it was his own views as the Roman Catholic's position on witches. No, I haven't had this book, but I've read some of it. And it's kind of scary, isn't it? Because when you start looking at bits and pieces of it, Val, it's horrible.
Yeah. Just from what you've told me, it was horrible.
You've just frozen slightly. There, you're back now. Yeah, it is.
I had to fix my volume.
I looked at some of the book, because this was I want to take everyone back to 1486 to imagine life in 1486. Now, as a woman in 1486, you had 2 roles, Val, wasn't it? Tell them what it was, Val.
You had rich and poor, pretty much.
Yeah.
You were the homemaker wife, and you've pretty much done everything that your husband told you to do. Then they had the healers, the women who lived single on their own, out, away from everybody, that were the unusual ones.
Yeah, and women, you talk about two lots of women, rich and poor, and it's quite weird that it's more the poor women that were accused of witchcraft than the richer ladies of that time. And I think that I want to look at part of this book, part of the Malleus. The more I say it, the more I know it. Malleus Maleficarum, and some of the things that actually they've written down here. as chapters to look at. And one that we were reading earlier on really made us feel quite sick. Do witches employ illusion to trick people into thinking that penises have been entirely uprooted from their bodies? I mean, hello? Is this... Wow. And then another one. Can witches use the art of trickery and deception to change people into animal shape, as in shapeshifters? And this is the one that actually was the one that made me feel quite ill. Midwives who work harmful magic, kill fetuses in the womb in different ways, procure a miscarriage, and when they do not do this, offer newly born children to evil spirits. Now, 1486, this guy, he's a Catholic clergyman. He's not even had sex, probably not even supposed to. Well,
who would want to with somebody exotic women like that?
He's not had sex, right? So what is he talking about? How would he know all this? And what kind of a mind would think of this?
Well, the Malleus
Maleficarum.
Thank you. In Latin actually means hammer of witches.
Yeah.
And it was, that was the hammer of witches.
Yeah.
And he wrote it in 1486. So, he had to go by what the Catholic Church told him. Mm-hmm. From their understanding, they told them what they wanted them to think. I think the Catholic Church back then pretty much told you everything that you were supposed to think.
Oh, yeah, they did.
So, I'm sure he thought he was some high scholar because he thought he knows exactly, good, bad, whatever.
Well, it was, wasn't it? It was condemned by theologians of the Inquisition at the Faculty of Cologne for recommending unethical and illegal procedures and being inconsistent with Roman Catholics' doctrines of demonology. So what they're actually saying is, what the hell are you writing about? This is not.
But between 1486 and 1600, it was accepted by Roman Catholics and Protestants as an authoritative source, of information concerning Satanism and all that stuff.
And he was in a Kramer. He was never taken away, never removed, and they actually gave him prestige afterwards, like, well done. And the book Malleus, great name, Malleus Maleficarum, actually calls...
Notice there's male in both of them.
Well, yes, calls sorcery heresy, which was a crime at that time, and that courts could prosecute it as such. Malleus suggests torture to get confessions and death as the only certain ways to end the evils of witchcraft. And one of the chapters in here, Val, was one of the other ones that we came up with earlier on. The various ways evil spirits uses witches to drag and entice innocent people to them for the purpose of increasing that particular form of treachery. But there was one at the top where I'm trying to find it, and it says, we talked about it, and it was like the torture. What was that one? How evil spirits exist inside bodies and heads without doing them injury. And it goes on, and it's like when you start looking down and how witches inflict various injuries on animals, how they stir up hailstones and bad weather. 3 ways where men are found to have been infected by magic. But there are 3 headings in that one, and it talks on it. But the one that you and I found, and I'm trying desperately to find it, it was how much torture is acceptable on a woman?
Well, I will tell you, I would have been in for it.
Me too.
Because in the MM book, it identifies witches as having red hair and green eyes.
Well, a lot of them, because it's Celtic, right?
And medieval and earlier sources also ascribe magical properties to the biological makeup of red-headed people. Latin texts in the 1300s stated that the blood of a redhead could turn copper into gold.
Yeah, I found it now. The method of sentencing the accused woman to be tortured. How should she be tortured on the first day? And can one promise to save her life? And it says the tricks and signs whereby the judge can recognize a witch. How should he protect himself against their harmful magic? How the women should be shaved in the places where they usually hide their protective amulets, and various explanations of how to counteract the amulet. I mean, this goes in about the proper time for the second interrogation and how it should be carried out. I mean, literally how much torture they should give you. And this is men against women, mainly poor women, mainly women that have very poor backgrounds, not a lot. And it could be the wise women. And obviously, we're going to come to the point with familiars and everything like that. But back at that time, I'm going to use the UK, we had still, Anne Boleyn had been accused of witchcraft by Henry VIII.
Wasn't that the easiest way?
Well, yes, that basically
to get rid of someone that you didn't want. Just witchcraft.
But they're talking about that when she lost her last baby, when she miscarried her large baby, the last one, it wasn't properly formed. It was, scaly and all this stuff. And in fact, she didn't know when she went into court, Anne Boleyn, what they were going to throw at her.
Yeah.
And then she was only when she was stood in there and she had no one to protect her, they actually accused her of witchcraft. And obviously back then, people like myself who have a mill, if you had
I got rid of mine. I got rid of my heart.
All signs of the devil. I think for me, when I was reading this book, it's like, here's this guy, he's got this book. And back then, the printing press had just come into its own power. So suddenly this book, where it was like talked about, only the rich would have it, but, now it was getting printed, as time went on, and people could get this book. And at the time, Elizabeth I, when ran around the time, was queen. But when James VI of Scotland and James I came down from James I of England, James VI of Scotland, when he came to England, that's when everything turned and the whole witch trials began. But I mean, Val, looking back, money was tight. You couldn't always get food. If you could have put stuff on the fire, that would be, to keep yourself warm.
Right.
And women, Druid, pagan, going all the way back, we've always learned from the land. We've always learned from nature. We've always taken the plants from nature, the wise women, the wise healers. So you would go to.
Well, back then, you didn't have, if you go back far enough, you didn't have doctors, you had healers.
That's right.
If you got sick, they would call in the healer. And what did they heal you with? They healed you with herbs and things that they concocted from things they got in nature.
Mm.
But then it turns into, well, that's not natural, and why do you know how to do that, and all this stuff. So they turn it, turn it into something something bad instead of what we all should know now.
Well, I mean, you know, when it says that the only certain way to end the evils of witchcraft was to confessions and torture and death. But apparently, when it was published, heretics were often sentenced to be burned alive at the stake. The Malleus suggested the same for witches. Now, the thing is, from what we know of England, heretics were burnt at the stake, but witches were not. Witches were drowned, or they were hung.
Yeah.
And some of the, and we will look at him a lot more next week, which is the Witchfinder General Matthew Hopkins. Some of the stupid, almost like inconceivable ways that we look at them now, how they made a woman a witch. But it's like this book was becoming more and more popular. And women, especially when James I came down to London, women must have been really scared to actually put a foot wrong, to say the wrong thing, to be accused of by something, because anyone could just go witch.
Well, excuse me. I think they were afraid to act. Sorry.
It's all right. Take your time.
Got strangled on my own tongue. They were afraid to act normal, but they were afraid to change their behavior. So they really didn't know how to act.
No.
And even ones that listened to other people still got charged. So, you know, you really couldn't take the advice of other people.
No.
Because that would just get you in trouble. You know, so what were you supposed to do?
I mean, it's quite interesting with the Malleus Maleficarum. 33 years after the book was first printed, Jacob Sprenger actually came along, and people said, "Well, why do you need to do this?" Because, you know, obviously Kramer had wrote it first, but Kramer was also accused of illegal behavior, and he was suspended because of his obsession with the sexual habits of the accused. Now that just goes to tell you that this is a man already has he's got prejudice against women. He's got obsessions with women.
Well, if he didn't, he wouldn't have wrote such a horrible book.
Yeah.
I mean, it's horrible.
But I think, as it says, in later years, this book was revived by the royal courts during the Renaissance and contributed to the increasing brutal prosecution of witchcraft during the 16th and 17th century. So we thought, well, you know, looking back, because we're going to talk more about those women next week, you know, what is the signs of being a witch back then, before we come to present day? What would they have been looking for?
Well, before I do that, I want to tell you, here's a little snippet of it. All witchcraft comes from carnal lust, which is in women insatiable,
Obviously.
What else is a woman but a foe to friendship, a necessary evil, a natural temptation, and what then is to be thought of those witches who is in this way sometimes collect male organs in great numbers.
I mean,
come on, man.
I mean, now we look at it with our brains in 2024, but back then the church ruled everything. You lived in fear of the church, and you're losing your immortal soul, because that's what they were afraid of. Everyone, as long as they went to church and they baptized and got married and got buried, and, you know, went to church, people kind of got left alone. However, I was looking down at what some of the signs are, and it says women have been seen by men as the weaker sex. And so we are more susceptible, like you said, to insatiable temptations and leading us into sin. We have apparently a natural hunger for ease of living and fine things, which means the devil can lure us into signing our name into his book without too much trouble.
Yeah.
So they're talking about the fact that even if you couldn't write, you could make a mark.
Yep.
And that would be the sign. And if you think about it, Adam and Eve, first woman, first guy, what happened to Eve? She was tempted by the devil and encouraged Adam. So even right back then,
and see, even though Adam went along with it, it's still her fault.
yes, 100%.
Yeah.
He's like, okay. So right back then, and you were saying in the Bible as well, there is. Tell us about the bit about the witch in the Bible.
The witch of Endor is in the Bible, and it's in 1 Samuel 28, 3 through 25. And I'll just read it. The witch of Endor is a figure in the Hebrew Bible, Old Testament, who appears in 1 Samuel 28, 3 through 25. She is described as having a talisman that allows her to summon the dead, a power that King Saul of Israel requests she used to speak to the prophet Samuel. Saul, Israel's first king, is concerned about the outcome of a battle against the Philistines and has previously forbidden magic and necromancy. But he disguises himself and visits the witch of Endor anyway. The witch of Endor summons the spirit that Saul identifies as Samuel, but the spirit instead prophesies doom for Saul and his army, who are later defeated.
So we're talking about witchcraft even in the Bible.
Yeah.
And you and I talked about Lilith, also spelled Lilith or Lilitu, feminine figure in Jewish mythology, theorized to be the first wife of Adam, and a primordial she-demon. And Lilith is cited as having been banished from the Garden of Eden for not complying with and obeying Adam. So where does Lilith come in and Eve? Are these the same people?
No, they're not the same people. From what I understand, actually the Bible translates the Lilith as the screech owl. And the Bible mentions the Lilith, not Lilith, but the Lilith, only once. It's in Isaiah 34:14. And as a dweller in waste places.
I mean, even in the popular show Supernatural, they bring Lilith in. You know, Lilith seems to be a character, and they've obviously demonized her. Obviously disobeyed Adam.
Well, see, it's more. It's not necessarily a Christian belief. It's more Jewish.
Yeah.
So I don't really know a whole lot about it.
It says she's mentioned in the Babylonian Talmud, if that's right. And it says in the conflict of Adam and Eve with Satan as Adam's first wife and as a hot, fiery female who first cohabited with men. And it seems that even going back to the Bible and biblical times, or from the start of when, you know,
see, Eve was made from part of Adam. So they were one. Lilith and Adam were made separate. Adam was made and Lilith was made.
Yeah.
So they both had their own free will, their own identities.
I mean, a woman who has her own free will. Scandal.
I mean, so she bucked on Adam. So she
Wow.
was forced out of the garden, and God took one of the ribs and made Eve.
Mm-hmm.
That's the Jewish, as far as I can understand, that's the Jewish belief. The Christian belief, it's not as much towards Lilith.
But are you kind of seeing a pattern that women are kind of described as being insatiable, I'll get this right. Oh my God, we had this last week. Temptress, and also like, you know, leading the men down a very dark path. And it seems like this has gone along in history, as you said, you know, even as an Anne Boleyn's criminal case against her. She was accused of witchcraft. So now we're looking at right from the start, women have been looked at and persecuted and called, you know, terrible names, even if they're innocent. I'm not saying not all of them, but even if they're innocent. And we come into what looks that where if the woman is a witch. So we're saying that obviously if you see a woman who's a bit loose with her morals, she's a bit out there, she's just doing this, that, and the other. Also, the next sign, does she have a pet? Because after she signed away her soul, the devil will give her a small spirit animal to attend to her, and this animal can shapeshift and be sent out to do her bidding. Well, none of my animals have never gone and got me pizza. And she might
won't even make me coffee in the morning.
Well, exactly. And they'll try to convince you that only black cats are suspicious. Don't believe her when she says, oh, this bird, it's just my pet. Be on guard for snakes, birds, cats, rats, dogs, and griffins. And I was telling you the other day, Val, and you can come in with your view, because I was in Italy and I wanted to buy a beautiful China print, and they all had tabby, they had ginger, they had ginger and black, all these colors, but no black cats. And I said to them, could you make me one for 2 black cats? Why do you want that?
Yeah,
because I do. And they went, well,
they see certain countries see it as
they're unlucky.
Yeah.
He said, no, they're unlucky. And I said, look, they're not in the UK. And actually, most animal rescues will tell you that even to this day, finding a black cat home and a black dog home, or any animal that's black, is still the hardest to do.
Sure. Yeah, I also found something for that, and it's called the familiar. Most people know what a familiar is, or kind of. They're actually a low-ranking demon that can take the form of an animal, cat, dog, toad, insect, whatever. And they're also known as spirit doubles and guardian spirits. So, you know, it's not like the witch actually made this. It's like it was sent to her as, you know, a guardian and all this.
That's what they believed.
Well, yeah.
When actually the truth is probably more like they loved them. They took them in. You know, everybody, you know, guard dog. If you had a cat,
now,
it'll get rid of the rats. So for instance, I have a black cat. You know, I have a black cat. I've got a mole on my face. So at the end of the day, do you know what I mean? I'm like you. I'm going
red hair, green eyes. I would have been like, forget it.
Now the other one we talked about is the woman irritating? Is she always asking for something or coming for something and unwanted? Does she make a spectacle of herself?
Man, I would be like up shit creek.
Is she begging for scraps or food because they're destitute? Are they weird around your family, including children? And we talked about the Scold's Bridle, which if everyone wants to look up on Google the skull's bridle. Val, tell us a bit. Have you got it up on the skull's bridle?
I will.
Very
I was going to tell you the very first witch that we know of was Hecate or Hecate, whatever you want to call it. She's the Greek goddess. She was the patron goddess of magic and witchcraft. Greek mythology.
I'm going to try while you're telling us about the skull's bridle, because the skull's bridle is often called a witch's bridle or a gossip's bridle, and it was actually an instrument of punishment for women.
And I think I can get a picture.
I'm going to see if I can put it on the. I'm going to see if I can put it on the screen. But there we go. A skull's bridle is an instrument of punishment and a form of public humiliation. It was an iron muzzle. Show it up again, Val. It was an iron muzzle.
To get an inside view of it.
In an iron framework that enclosed the head. And there was a bridle, like a horse has. There was a bridle bit, which was slid into the mouth and pressed down on top of the tongue, often with a spike on the tongue as a compress. So this is really painful.
That right there.
Frightened to speak because it will hurt you. It will be incredibly painful. The skull's bridle was used on women, prevented speaking, and resulted in many unpleasant side effects for the wearer, including excessive salivation and fatigue in the mouth. And for extra humiliation, as if that wasn't enough, they would put a bell on you and walk you through the crowds by a lead. And I cannot, I actually have I mean, it just doesn't bear thinking about. Imagine having a really hot summer, really hot summer, and you're not allowed to drink, you're not allowed to eat, you've got to wear that, and everybody's looking at you, everybody's calling you. It's awful. Yeah.
Well, like I said before, I'm sure there are men today that would absolutely love this.
Well, and probably would love to use it. Absolutely. It was first in England. It was first recorded in Scotland in 1567, and it was used in England and its colonies. And Scotland inflicted the contraption mostly on female and women considered to be rude, nags, common scolds, or drunk. It was designed as a punishment for the women of the lower classes whose speech was deemed righteous and troublesome. And I just think to myself, like, why do men, and I have to ask this question, why do men want to inflict so much back then, and even to this day in some ways, punishment and pain on women?
Because they can. They could. It was that power they had. You know, we were seen as property pretty much. They could do whatever they wanted to do. You know, and just like a disobedient animal, that's how we were treated.
Yeah.
You know, you've got a dog that bites, you put a muzzle on it.
The thing about the skull's bridle, it wasn't used in the New World much. However, in Virginia, it was used on a slave to control them in the mid-18th century. So we hadn't learned anything with those years going past at all.
Well, think about they stayed with the old ways for a long time.
Yeah.
They, you know, when they come over here, they brought all that with them.
There was, I was saying to Val earlier on, in Walton-on-Thames in Surrey, which is very much near me, a replica was of the skull's bridle was stolen in 1965 from a cabinet in the vestry of the church, and it had the inscription, "Chester presents Walton with a bridle to curb women's tongues that talk to idol. Oral tradition is this Chester lost a fortune due to a woman's gossip and presented the instrument of restraint to torture out anger and spite. And the church states it came to the parish in 1723, and it obviously was stolen. Nobody knows where it is to this day. Probably in someone's red room somewhere with all the...
probably on someone's wife.
You know, someone's red room somewhere, I would imagine there, Val. What do you think?
Probably. Or out being made duplicates of.
There were a few men that wore it as well. Not many, but a few. But going back to the, you know, so you've got somebody who's like, could you help me? Could you spare some change? Could you give me some food? And it was like, she's a pain, want to get rid of her. You know, that was another one. The other one was her age. Her age went against you. If and obviously we're thinking young women, you know, live bodies, tempting men to, you know, to do this. And it wasn't, they went for, well, there was some, but they went for potentially between 40 and 60 years of age. So we're screwed.
I know, right? I'm just like, I might as well just slow down.
Yes. Very much vulnerable women. Very much vulnerable women, you know, women that were poor, as we talked about. Poor and old. And I would imagine that some of these women were very, very alone. And to be accused to be a witch, taken out from all your friends and family, your house ransacked, whatever you had left as a house ransacked, and tortured and interrogated, you would be, you wouldn't know what to do, because you would want to say, no, I'm innocent. But the other half of you would be saying, well, if I say I'm guilty, I could get let off, not realizing what was coming for you.
Yeah, I mean, you're gonna die either way.
Yes.
I mean, when you're in that position, really all they're telling you is, we want to save your soul.
Mm.
So if you confess, you know, that means that you're free of the evil and you can go to heaven or all that.
Yeah.
But the witch trials were different in different parts of even the U.S. Not only here or the Americas, I should say, and in the UK, it was very different in different parts of America.
Mm.
Yeah, you know, of course, we all know what happened in Salem, how that went down.
Yes, of course. Famous one. And, you know, it talks about, is she quick to anger? Have you ever been attacked by her? Has she screamed at you? Have you seen her hit someone? Have they stopped going to church? That would be a great sign, obviously. Maybe she's too tired from attending witches' sabbaths and drinking red wine, obviously. Right. Has she threatened you? Have you seen her spirit in your house at night? Has she confessed? So maybe you did ask her to prove she wasn't a witch and you gave her a good beating just to get it out of her. But she still said, no, I'm not a witch. What are you going to do with her then? Well, there would be only one way to do that. And obviously, as we'll look at next week, there are torture, and that would ultimately lead to, sadly, dying or being murdered.
Either way, you're dead.
Either way, you're gone. And for me, Val, like when I came to witchcraft, when I came to the craft, for me, nobody pointed me in that direction. It was an instinct thing. I was 7 when I sort of felt drawn. You know, I'll come to you and tell me your path, but I was 7 when I started to go down that road. My mum said she never taught me Halloween. She never, you know, told me anything about it. And I felt drawn to it. I started celebrating it. It was a natural progression to learn the craft. And I always like, obviously, you know, the light and the dark side of the force, but I've always stayed on the white magic in Wicca. And for me, it was just like getting in touch with myself, with nature, with energy, with, feeling all that around me. And, we're all built of energy. All of us are born of energy. The table we're using, the everything, the bracelet, it's all energy. We come from energy, we go back to energy. So we're tapping into that. And for me, it was a natural progression. But I never wanted to join a coven. I never wanted to go down that road. I always wanted to be what they call a hedge witch, which means you work alone.
Yeah.
But it was a touching and tapping into nature. And people are so frightened still. I don't know how you find it, but some people have mentioned it to in my past. I dated a guy. Actually, it was that really tough relationship, the aggressive one. And his grandmother was Catholic. She would not talk to me. She would not talk to me. She accused me of being a witch. She knew I did the tarot cards, even though she read the tea leaves herself. She accused me of being, it was different. She accused me of being a witch, had nothing to do with me, didn't want me anywhere near her, and would actually turn around and say, no, you can't tell anything. You can't do anything. And it just felt, what year are we in? And another, which I thought were very with it, wise, up to date with everything. They were like, oh, no, witchcraft is this, that, and the other. It's still getting a bad press, Val. Why, for you, what was your path like? How did you come to the craft?
Well, I would say that I've tried to learn as much as I can about it, which I still don't know a quarter of it, I'm sure. But it was almost like tiptoed to the edge, but something just kept, I think it's that, or it's drilled in your head, evil, it's so evil. And I think it was the point where I was afraid to even try any of it. Because I didn't know enough about what not to do to keep from doing something I shouldn't have. You know what I'm saying? So I feel like, honestly, the dreams that I have, that I was a healer or something in the past, I can see it when I meditate. I can see it in my dream that I have had the same dream for years. But it's almost like that ledge you don't want to step off of. You have that. And I'll study some more before I do anything.
Because especially if you come from a religious background or you've been brought up in I remember the days of going to church and the Bible being brought out and slammed down on the table and this is this. It was still, when we were growing up, it was still dinned into us. You can't do that. It's evil.
Exactly. But the more I learn about the paranormal, the more I know that you can do one thing wrong and open that wrong door.
Yeah.
So I don't want to do that. I've been very cautious of that.
Yes. I mean, it's interesting if people remember the Wizard of Oz, and you have the witch, the Wicked Witch of the West in the Wizard of Oz. She has a very typical prejudiced look of witches. She's wearing all black. She's green faced. She's got the conical hat, the broom, and I'll get you, my pretty. And everyone was terrified of her.
Right.
And the thing about the hat, we were talking about, the hats, the hats have always been ceremonial. always been ceremonial. Even the priests in the Bronze Age would use a ceremony. I get the right word out now. Ceremonial conical hats made of gold and decorated with the stars and moon. That's going back all that way. But it says here the conical hat was once a badge of distinction. It later became a symbol of disgrace. Those who disobeyed the law, committed heresy, or held religious ideas and practices at odds with the, obviously, religion of the day, were required to wear a conical hat throughout the Middle Ages. So even the hat that witches wear is a symbol of this is the person who's basically a heretic and disobeying.
Well, I did find that during that time, I guess before the actual conical hat was a sign of wisdom, freedom, otherness, deception, and shame. So it was all those things.
Yeah.
But did you know that in the Western China Desert, dating back 4,000 years, there were mummies found, and they had the conical hats.
Yeah.
And they were an ancient group that these mummies came from, and they were the witches of Subesh. That's what they were called, the witches of Subesh. So even 4,000 years ago, they had, they were calling these women witches, and they were wearing those hats.
And isn't it weird that you think of the film Practical Magic with Sandra Bullock and Nicole Kidman, and they're wearing the hat. They're all wearing the hat, and you remember over the years, Sabrina the Teenage Witch, Bewitched, etc., etc. The hat, they've all got the hat. And it's like, but actually when you look at it, it's not actually... I wonder if they've used that as time has gone on as a symbol of disobedience, where our predecessors used it as ceremonial.
Yeah. Well, I think so, because I think it became so synonymous with witch that, what's the first thing kids think of when you say witch? They go put the hat on.
Exactly.
So, it went from one thing, and it kind of morphed, I think, into something totally different.
And then we look at the bezoom, which is obviously the broom, as we call them, bezooms. And it's weird how brooms are another thing that is used in ceremonial.
Yep.
They were used for clearing and purifying spaces, and we still use them today. Every house probably in the world, every home, I should say, every home has got a broom.
Yeah.
And I don't know about you, but my mum used to open the door on New Year's Eve, and she'd open the door and the back door, and they would sweep out, to bring out the old and to bring in the new one. That was something I grew up with, and I used to think, why are you opening the doors? But they were, in ancient times, they were used to sweep away negative energy and protect homes from evil spirits, and used in rituals. And yet again, that's another thing, using the Wicked Witch of the West and practical magic. They've got the bezoom, they've got the hat.
Yeah.
So where did this image of this witch come from? Like, which bright spark said, actually, they've got to have a conical hat and a bezoom?
Well, I think it all just kind of fell into place because they all have such different meanings. The broom, the pagan fertility ritual, the local farmers would leap and dance around.
That's right.
On top of a broom, astride. They would ride a broom around like a horse, or pitchforks, or things like that. in the light of the full moon to, bring in good crops. So, that was probably just something that was handed down, from generation to generation. The people may not even, half the people may not have even know why they do that.
It's interesting you brought up about wedding ceremonies where the bride and groom would jump we call it jump the broomstick now, don't we? Would jump over the bezoom as a symbol of their commitment to each other. Yep. But what they're actually saying is the bezoom, B-E-S-O-M, bezoom, has association with magic, can be traced back to the early modern period where the persecution of witches was at its peak. During this time, bezooms were often used, they said, by witches to fly through the air and meetings with other witches known as sabbats. And this portrayal of bezooms in popular culture has persisted to this day and has come to, and you'll know at Halloween time, you'll see little kids walking around with little broomsticks. And I always kept a bezoom at my front door. Like I don't have one now because unless it's tied down, people steal it. Well, certainly where I am, but I don't have one, but I always did. I always had, and it was the original, I'm
sorry to say you need the sticks and the brush and
yes,
twine them together. Yeah.
Yeah. It was always, and for me, it was always like part of just what I wanted. I felt drawn to it. I mean, with magic or witchcraft or however you want to pronounce it, you're looking at the elements fire, earth, air, and water, but there's also spirit being the fifth element. And when we do practice the craft, we are tapping into all those elements. We're using fire, we're using earth and water and air, and obviously our spirit.
But see, so many people associate witchcraft and Satanism.
Yes.
It just scares them. It scares them. And I can understand why it scares them because I have that same reaction to certain things.
Yeah.
So
this is the picture I wanted to bring up, which I think everybody
yeah.
The very, very, very popular Wicked Witch of the West. That's what people are used to seeing, a witch, green face. And in fact, there is a show in the West End called Wicked, where it's about the Wicked Witch of the West and her good sister, Glenda. And she, that's what they look like.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you always, if you told a child or any adult to draw a witch, they would draw, the hat, the broom, the black, the green face, the wart on her nose.
Yeah.
The old hag. That's pretty much what they would draw.
And they always had the shoes in the movies, didn't they? They always the shoe would curl up. Why? I have no idea. But there's always the shoe that curls up, Certainly if you look at Hocus Pocus and you look at Bette Midler, she was amazing in that role. But my goodness, her shoes right all the way round. The other one is the cauldron, which was another sign and symbol of a witch. And now back then, Val, most people would have had a cauldron in the home. That's what they used to cook on. That's what they used to probably boil washing or,
everybody did. Yeah. Everybody had a cauldron. It wasn't something rare.
No.
To see a cauldron.
Oh.
But for some reason, they felt the need to bring it into the, like the witch's brew.
Mm.
Even I found this. Even Shakespeare talked about a cauldron.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure what it's from, but I thought I thought when we got to the cauldron, I would read this. Fillet of a finny snake, in the cauldron boil and bake. One of eye of newt and toe of frog, wool of bat and tongue of dog, adder's fork and blind worm's sting, lizard's leg and owlet's wing, for a charm of powerful trouble, like a hell broth full and bubble. So, I mean, even he talked about it.
Yes. I mean, as you say, cauldrons were found in every home. They're a practical thing to use. And it doesn't mean that it's significant to a witch, because apparently in some going back texts, it says it was actually represents the goddess in her womb of transformation. But I mean, I don't know about you, but I'm finding a cauldron these days seems to be a hard thing to find. Like, I've got a little tiny one, but I do not have the big cauldrons anymore. You can't get them, can you, that easily?
No, I don't think you can. And I think it's just not practical.
Yeah.
I think that's the whole thing. Because, I mean, you know, you think back then they had the fire and the stand that you hook the cauldron on and put it over the fire. So you cook whatever you want to in it. And now it's just really not practical. Plus, I wouldn't want to get one and it end up being like Ed Gein's cauldron or something.
I'm not exactly sure getting in and cleaning it, you know, these days.
Oh, I don't think that they cleaned it spotless before they cooked again in it. I'm just saying.
The interesting thing about the witch being, you know, into witchcraft is that our ancestors, you know, women, it was passed down from woman to woman to woman, normally within the family. And so it was a way of connecting with our ancestors, you know, women that had passed over and their DNA runs through our bodies. And my nan, I discovered years later, she practiced the craft. She had quite a few gadgets in her not her cauldron, but in her sideboard, as we would call them. And I never knew she was interested in it, but she was. My mum might do a few traditions. My sister might do a few traditions, but it was me that kind of followed in her footsteps.
Yeah.
And you know, when I think about that saying, we're the great etc granddaughters of the witches that you can burn, I feel actually proud, because at the end of the day, so many women were persecuted, tortured, murdered by predominantly men. I've got to say, predominantly men, for being a witch when they were not.
Right. In Celtic mythology, cauldrons, they were part of the ancient Celtic feasts.
Yep.
And had its own special place in mythology, where it was given magical properties and associated with abundance, regeneration, and fertility. So the cauldron, I think, you know, as much as we associate it with witchcraft, or you know, the devil, or you know, the three witches, you know, boiling up eyeballs.
Yeah.
It does have roots everywhere, and if I'm not mistaken, my grandmother used to make a lot of soap, and she had, you know, a big pot. It may not have been a exact cauldron, but it was this brown metal pot. So, you know, would she have been seen as, you know, a witch making soap?
The thing is, I was reading this afternoon, because you know I try and do all my bits and pieces on a Sunday. So but 400 years ago, that wasn't that long, but 400 years ago, the European witch hunts were at their peak. But they reckon between the 15th and 18th century, 50,000 people, mostly women, were executed for witchcraft. They were accused of devil worship, heresy, and harming their neighbors. And in the 1620s, most intense phase of persecution was in Eichstätt, I believe, in Germany, where 300 women, I won't call them witches, but 300 women were executed. And some people think that witchcraft is a medieval idea, but this gentleman I was reading this afternoon says no, it's actually modern. The Christian church was skeptical about the reality of witchcraft until the 15th century. And even then, most clergymen and theologians did not believe that witchcraft was a threat. The first trials of people who believed to be malevolent worshippers of the devil actively causing harm was in the 15th century. The most intense period of witch hunting was 1560. That's a hell of a long time, 1560 to 1630.
Yeah.
Before that, there were very few witchcraft trials because acts of witchcraft were believed to be an illusion caused by the devil with the permission of God. Now, that's an interesting thought, that it's modern day thought that brought somebody somewhere came up with this, and women died a painful death. They were tortured, they were burnt, they were hung, they were drowned. And as we'll look at next week and the week after, families were wiped out in one go.
And these were God-fearing people.
They were
God-fearing women and men that never did anything wrong.
No.
Someone may have, they may have looked at somebody cross-eyed, and that's it. They were accused of things that, they would have never dreamed of doing.
Yes.
But, let someone just say something. And I feel like they wanted a reason to do this.
Yeah.
And they used any excuse, which, I mean, who nowadays do you know would take, 4 little girls saying the specter of a nanny was harming them?
Yeah.
And that be legit in court.
I also think as well that when we look at that, there just seemed to be this persecution of women by men.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, it does feel like down the ages, there's this persecution of us. And an interesting topic was obviously voodoo, very, very different to witchcraft. Haitian voodoo, which was developed in Haiti between 16th and 19th century. And it came from apparently several traditional religions of West of Central Africa and Roman Catholicism. So voodoo is very different.
Oh, yeah.
But people are still practicing voodoo today. And it's actually a little bit scary. I actually find it a little bit scary.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not going to say that I haven't thought about getting a voodoo doll.
Yes. I think we've all had, we call them a mummet doll as well. I think it's a mummet doll. But there's places over here, Tooting, other sort of places like that, where you can find a man who will go out the back and get a chicken for you and sacrifice it, poor thing, and for whatever you want to do.
One thing, voodoo dolls were also called puppets. So, just beware, by the way. Puppet.
Yeah. But I mean, that does, I mean, I've always found it really weird that that's allowed, or at least people know it exists. And you can walk down the road and you can pop in to see Doctor, whatever their name are. And they'll say, what do you want? Well, I need a love spell. I need something like that. And the next thing you know, out comes the chicken or the snake.
But I think a lot of times it's not seen as, it's seen more as like the psychic on the corner.
Yeah.
It's not taken seriously.
Should do.
And I would think in New Orleans and places where it's so relevant,
Yeah.
that perhaps they are afraid to not let them practice.
Well, it's seen as a religion, right?
Exactly. See, they're afraid to not let, for either political views or simply because they know what they can do.
If voodoo is seen as a religion, why? Obviously, it's taken years to get witchcraft, Wiccan, pagan,
Right.
Druids to be actually seen as a religion as well in their own right.
Right.
Because when I was growing up, you know, you even mentioned something along the lines of witch. It was like, oh no, you don't want to say anything like that. Or do you remember like being a kid and going, that woman's a witch? You know, she lives on her own. She's an older woman. Don't knock on her door. It's really scary. She's a witch.
Well, you know, it comes from back 14th, 15th century. You know, when the healers, 9 times out of 10, they didn't have a husband.
Mm-hmm.
They were older, lived alone, outside of town. You know, they were solitary. They didn't need people.
So like that's a voodoo doll?
Yes.
And you can even buy friendly, cute looking ones now. Little fluffy ones that you can just take home and stick something in.
I have, Megan, actually, hold on.
Here it is. Here's one here that you can obviously get from Ipsy. Look, isn't that cute? Everybody wants their own voodoo doll. That cute.
I actually got this one from the girls.
Every home needs one.
You know, it's ceramic or resin, and you put an incense in it.
Yeah.
And the incense comes out its eyes.
Every home needs one.
So, but, you know, we really, like I was saying, they're really not taken to their full seriousness.
No.
You know, people over there take it very seriously because they've either been affected by it,
yeah,
know the priestess or whatever. What is it, Marie Laveau?
Yes.
She was the famous voodoo priestess.
Very famous.
So, I mean, you know, it came from Caribbean or Haiti.
Mm.
And I think mixed with Roman Catholic and, you know, all that stuff. So, you know, if we believe in the paranormal and we believe in things like that, why would it be so far-fetched to believe in things like this?
Mm. Absolutely. And I also think as well, like, you know, so many things like tarot cards, which the Egyptians used. Egyptians used tarot cards. They had their own form of divination, of asking things. Look at the runes that the Vikings used. These are all things that people have been told by the, I have to say, the church, religion, not just the Christian church, but all kinds of other religions. Yeah. That this is evil.
But I mean, I truly don't get. I mean, I understand part way these other religions. You know, they have the talismans and all this. Why are they I can't even talk now. Discluded. Is that even a word?
Mm.
Okay. It don't sound right. When, you know, the Christians have talismans also.
Absolutely. Well, the pentagram is obviously seen to be scary, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. But, you know, we have, even the Jewish religion has the Star of David.
Mm-hmm.
That's just an inverted pentagram. Or the pentagram's an inverted Star of David.
How interesting.
But you know, I mean, I know if I walk in somewhere and I see an upside down cross, I'm out. Simply because, you know, it shows they're not religious like me.
I
They're
think
more satanic.
it's easy to say, though, because there's so many religions in the world today, so many faiths, different faiths and beliefs. From the main, which is obviously Roman Catholic, Anglican, Muslim, Jewish,
Yeah.
Hindu, Sikh, etc. There's lots of them.
Yeah.
But I think if you think about for England, the original faith would be Druid and pagan.
Yeah.
And some people don't know this, but the lovely church, the Catholic Church, incorporated some of the pagans' beliefs into.
Well, they took what they took what they liked,
yes,
and what went along with what they believed, and threw out everything else,
including the wedding ring, because they believe the pagans believed that there was an artery or vein that ran all the way from here to the heart, which is why this ring has always been called the wedding ring. And then there was the binding, you know, the binding of or rather he puts his little thing over it, but it was a binding, hand fasting, you know, it was hand fasting. And now they incorporated that into the church as well. Right. The other thing, which you and I celebrate every year, Halloween, 31st of October, there were only 10 months in the calendar.
Yeah.
October being the last night of the year, it was New Year's Eve, and our ancestors believed that the veil grew very thin and we could see our ancestors, you know, and it was a bit scary. So we would put out over here, it was the turnip. It was a very strange looking thing, but they would put the turnip out and put candles in it. They would also bring in plants in, or a tree or a small branch, and decorate it. That sounds really similar to a Christmas tree, doesn't it?
And a Halloween pumpkin.
Yes. And also as well, they actually included 2 more months of the year, November, I believe, and December, I think they were there, which totally then changes when Jesus was born as well. So it's almost like they've taken a bit of this and a bit of that, and then they, you know, when you look at it, religion has a lot to ask for. It's very much about controlling, sadly, over the years. It has been.
And I think that's why organized religion has had a lot of people kind of turn their back on it.
Yes.
Because they feel like they're being controlled.
Yes.
I'm kind of
sitting on the fence, Val.
Yeah, kind of. Not necessarily with my beliefs. I know what I believe, but I worship and I believe the way I believe, not how someone tells me to believe, if that makes sense. You know, you can, I'm not saying that going to church is a bad thing. Going to the wrong one is, but I think you have to go with how your heart feels.
For sure. For sure.
Instead of how somebody tells you to think.
Now, looking at the pentagram, you talked about that, the 5-pointed star, usually drawn by using one continuous line of 5 straight segments, used throughout history as a symbol, often in magic or the occult. Its meaning has varied widely over time, and it has functioned in a lot of ways as a symbol of protection or perfection of the devil and humanity, among others. Mathematically, the segments of the pentagram exhibit the golden ratio, which perhaps makes the figure more pleasing. So you were talking about, this was something that was used for thousands of years. It was used in Egypt. It was used in Greece. You know, the pentagram was always used, and obviously passed down, like, you know, drawing it came obviously over to the pagans and the Druids as well. So this is a symbol that's been used as a good symbol.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, I know with the Greeks, they used it as a symbol to ward off evil, the evil eye. And you'll often see it in pottery.
Yeah.
Because people want that protection. It's weird, isn't it? You would have that on your pottery.
Well, you see it a lot in jewelry also.
I have one. I wear it.
It's actually very commercialized, and it's
No,
not. It's kind of like desensitized. People just think, "Oh, well, that's pretty," and don't really know the meanings behind it.
And yet, I remember wearing a pentagram years ago. You were like, get out. They wanted nothing to do with you.
Right.
It says pentagrams were used as a symbol of the 5 knightly virtues. Even Sir Gawain of King Arthur's time wears a golden pentagram on both his shawl and his shield as a mark of his virtual loyalty and kindness. Pentagrams were used to defend against witches, evil spirits, and demons. And obviously, it says in the 16th century, they published a version of the pentagram that symbolized man as a perfected work of God with head, hands, and feet. You probably know that very famous symbol. Hands and feet representing the 5 points and symbols of the 5 known plants around them. Now, I remember seeing that, the naked man.
Emily's got it in her bedroom on the wall.
That is a pentagram.
Yeah. To show that, how these symbols can be screwed up.
Sure.
Things. Everyone knows the swastika.
Yes. Yes.
It was actually South Asian symbol of good luck and spirituality, used for thousands of years. The Nazis took it, and now what is it? It's a Nazi symbol.
I have my friend of mine, Charlie. She just, I hope she doesn't mind me sending it. She says, "This is my mother's earth," and I've started to do tarot readings. As my mum and people know me, they think, this is very cool of her to share it with us. If we can bring it up, can you see it?
Oh yeah.
I think women are drawn. Women, if I'm completely honest, we talked about intuition. Women being the more sensitive of the sexes, we're sensitive to the vibrations of others and of the world. Therefore, we pick up on situations and matters much more easy. So obviously, we tap into our intuition and we use tools for divinations, the tarot, the bones, runes, reading hands, pendulum, and even the Ouija board, which is one that we'll have to look at another time. But, people also use astrology to know when to cast spells. When was the right time? When was the lunar cycle? When was the moon in the right place? So it made the magic more potent. It made the spell more potent. We talked about sacred sex last week, about a natural sexual magic, when to have the most powerful reaction to something at certain times of the month, when the full moon, etc., etc. People use crystals now. They use stones such as amethyst, obsidian, and pyrite. They have healing baths with Epsom salts and flowers. We do meditations. We do breathing, all to help ground us. And this helps us to manifest and bring ourselves to our higher level. Yeah. So this is the modern day witch, how now we're allowed to do this. We see women outside or guys walking around barefoot on the grass, hugging trees, taking in nature, feeling the vibrations and ley lines, and going to such places like that where you're feeling it more powerful. And people don't turn their hair now. We've got to a point now where people go, it's okay. It's cool. It's
like I said, cool. People have been desensitized so much.
Yeah.
That they've kind of grown out of that terror that people used to feel, see these things.
Yes.
That if I look at it, I'm going, hell. I think hell has been driven into so many people's heads.
Yes.
That they really, it's almost, they make you so afraid to do anything, you know, because well, that's not what we like. That's not what we think. Therefore, you're going to hell.
It's interesting that the Freemasons use the pentagram as well. And they sometimes place a G in the center. Also, pentagrams have been used in along Muslims. The pentagram is known as Solomon's seal, and its 5 points are regarded as tradition, as love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. This is a symbol that has been used since probably time began. And has come down and down. In Christians, it symbolizes the 5 wounds of Christ: hands and feet punctured by crucifixion, and his side pierced by a soldier's spear, as well as the Star of Bethlehem and Christ himself. So it's come down. But in Wiccan, in pagan, in Wiccan, if you want to call it, which I do, Wicca, it's obviously a circle, a star in a circle. I should have worn mine tonight. And the 5 points represent, as I said, fire, water, earth, air, and spirit. For Wiccans, the pentagram also symbolized masculine and feminine, or the triple goddess and the horned god. And we use it as protection. We still see it as a symbol of protection. My friend Mark has a tattoo of the pentagram on here. And obviously we also have to look at the other side, because we always do. We like to cover all of it. It's also used in the inverted figure of the pentagram, with 2 points facing upward and 1 facing down, is associated with negative or black magic and devil worship. Indeed, the inverted pentagram figures in the signal of, is it Baphomet? One of the main symbols of the Church of Satan. So they have the upside down pentagram, and sometimes they don't even look much different. So I have to be honest. And I think it's, is it Baphomet? I think if I've got it right, forgive me if I've got it wrong, is a goat with its horns in the upturned points of the star. So the pentagram is used in all different faiths, from Muslim, Catholic, Church of England, Jewish, Wiccan, pagan, and satanic. This is a symbol that's used.
Yeah. Well, you know, I guess they see him. I don't know how they got that the devil looks like him.
Well, someone's got a good imagination. Oh.
But, you know, I mean, I think it's a thin line that you kind of have to go with your gut, so to speak.
Yeah.
Certain things, and it's weird sometimes. Certain things doesn't bother me. I can see a picture or whatever, doesn't bother me. Certain things I can even be looking through a book or on the internet or whatever, and I'll run across a certain symbol, a certain picture, and I can't look at it. I have to turn. And
because it triggers you. It triggers you.
Yeah. And I think that's that gut feeling that's just telling me to stay away from it.
I have, I know Charlie said about looking at the Ouija board, which we will take that on board for another show. But interesting, what I read was apparently there's a long history that associates witches with advocacy and defending the disfranchised. In fact, witches started wearing pointed hats to stand in allegiance with Jews and Quakers who were persecuted for their religious beliefs. There's even a band of mystics called W.I.C.H. Women's International Terrorist Conspiracy from Hell, who stand together for the rights of others. This started in the 1960s. as a feminist group, but later took to the streets to protest the patriarchy, stand up for feminism and the LGBTQ rights, and defend the police as well with the Black Lives Matter. So, like, it's still, you know, it's still going on. Also, being a feminist, does that mean we're also seen back then? If we were a feminist back then, we would have been seen as a witch.
I mean, I would have had red hair, green eyes, the mark in my, you know, I'd have been burned in a second.
Interesting
First time
point.
I opened my mouth.
Interesting point to know that, and perhaps you can tell us about some in Virginia, but in the UK, we didn't burn witches. We hung them or drowned them, mostly hung. Everyone knows about the ducking stools, where women were put on the stools and they were ducked time and time again into the water. If they survived by some miracle, they were a witch and then be hung. And then obviously, Val, we talked about last week with the tying of the toe and the finger, which I'll leave you to come up with in a second. The other thing as well, being hung, you know, sometimes they didn't actually always do it very cleanly. So you didn't actually die straight away. You would literally, you
strangled to death.
Very, very painful. The interesting thing as well with the drowning was that purifying you. If you're going into water, water's always seen as purification. You know, you get christened, you get baptized, you get born again. But for some reason, when they kept dunking you into the water and you survived, they didn't see that you were purified. They saw that you were, you know, obviously in league with the devil. We still have one there's a pub in London and they still have a ducking store outside. And I haven't seen this, Val, and I need to go see it. Tell me about Virginia.
Well, Virginia was a little more lax. They still had the witch trials and all that, but it was seen more as a, it wasn't necessarily, it was more of a misdemeanor and not a felony. It was more of a civil trial. You know, they had, you know, you might go to jail, you might not, but it wasn't necessarily always the threat of death. But in, let's see, I think it was 1680, no, 1697. A woman by the name of Grace Sherwood. She was known as the Witch of Pungo. She was in Virginia. She was from the colony of Virginia. And she was born of a Scottish father and English mother. In 1680, she married a farmer, James Sherwood, and they had 3 sons. They were poor, but they owned 100 acres of land. But, you know, they had to work it themselves. So she worked the family's farm. She grew like herbs and, you know, things. She done things that in that book would make her a witch. I mean, she worked the land herself. She cared for her family and her animals. She grew herbs and all that stuff. She was attractive, stubborn, and a nonconformist who wore pants when she worked outside. She spoke up for herself, and she cared deeply for her animals. So, I mean, right there, you know.
All the marks of a witch.
Yeah. In 1697, the first accusation of witchcraft against her came when a local man accused her of using a spell to kill his bull. The court made no decision, and in turn, Grace sued for defamation, even back then, with the case being resolved through a settlement. Following year, she was accused of witchcraft 2 more times by 2 separate individuals. A neighbor first complained to the court that his pigs and cotton were placed under spell and destroyed, while another neighbor said her home was invaded when Sherwood transformed into a body of a black cat while proceeding to beat her and whip her. Both cases remained unresolved, and once again the defamation charge was brought against each party. This time without resolution. Grace and her husband were forced to pay for their court costs after each failed defamation case, further sending the family into debt. In 1701, James, her husband, passes, and she inherited all of that 100 acres, so she pretty much had to do it herself with her sons. She found herself embroiled in at least a dozen legal cases, ranging from accusations of witchcraft to assault. In 1705, after a fight with her neighbor, Elizabeth Hill, another lawsuit was brought against it for assault and battery. She had to pay them 20 shillings. As a reason behind this fight is lost to history, only speculation. There is, however, no doubt that this early conflict likely fueled the accusations of witchcraft against Sherwood from Hill, claiming Sherwood bewitched her and caused her to have a miscarriage. She was in Princess Anne County in Virginia, which is up close to Virginia Beach, up that area. The court system sought to create 2 all-women jurors, jury panels to perform the search of Sherwood's family home and physical examination of her herself. Great reluctance. They did so. After 2 months of deliberation, the group of 12 elderly women, led by previous accuser Elizabeth, who appointed to conduct the physical examination. So think of it. She had 12 females, wow, but one of them had already accused her of stuff.
Yeah.
Can you say bias? The result of their investigation concluded the existence of 2 witches' marks, and thus tangible proof of the devil at work. So she was accused. She says, "I be not a witch, I be a healer." Didn't matter. So they, in the early morning of July the 10th, she was taken down a dirt street, and I was trying to find exactly, so I didn't do it. Under the guidelines of, I guess, the church and the books that they had back then, under these guidelines, Sherwood was bound right thumb to left toe, left big toe, left thumb to right big toe, and she was covered in a sack, and then weighed down with a 13-pound Bible strapped around her neck. Spectators gathered to watch the event unfold and lined the riverbank to see what would befall the alleged witch of Fungo. Miraculously, despite being tied and weighed down, Grace Sherwood was able to free herself and swim to shore. Although she escaped the ordeal with her life, this all but proved her guilt to the colonial authorities and those in attendance. So even though she freed herself,
yes,
it just proved that she was a witch. They're not exactly clear on the what the details of her imprisonment was. but she was imprisoned, I think for 8 years in jail.
Wow.
And then when she got out, she had to pay her neighbor for 600 pounds of tobacco. So we don't know if she actually paid it or not. But in 1714, she completed on back taxes. So we don't know if she paid for the tobacco or not, but she did have to pay on back taxes.
Mm-hmm.
And she stayed in at that family farm till she was 80 years old in 1740. But can you imagine going through all that?
And to survive to 80 as well. Interesting. Yeah. If you looked at the promo, you'll actually see that I actually put in Lafayette, who was in True Blood, and he was a male witch. And it's true that most witches or women were tried for witchcraft. 80% of those were women, but men were also tried as well. And they would always pick the female over the male, but men were picked.
This is Grace.
Isn't she pretty? Beautiful.
She had to be one strong woman to go through that.
Some places like Russia, apparently, it was mainly men that were found to be witch suspects. And I think under torture, Val, under a lot of torture, any of us would actually give out names of people. Come on, tell me who else is a witch. Who else do you know?
I think especially if we didn't know what was coming. If we believed what they said when they said, you know, stop the torture and tell us what you know, you're automatically going to think, okay, if I tell them something, they're going to stop.
Yeah.
But that's normally not what happened. You know, that it just either prolonged, you know, your wait to be executed, or it quickened it.
It's interesting when you talk about that lady being 80, that she survived to 80, because over here they were kept in dungeons and, you know, were barely fed, barely took care of. They would have smelled horrendous. They would have been freezing cold in the winter, rarely given anything to keep warm. Most of them would not survive because of the climate as well. Most of them would die. But the case of Ursula Kemp, one of 2 witch suspects, I should say, in St. Oswith, I think, in Essex, were hanged in 1582. Kemp was a figure in the town, a woman who had an illegitimate son who used to make ends through her healing skills. And she was hung for being a witch because she would like do what she could to bring money in to you know, think about it today. What happens if the UK and other such countries didn't have the benefit system and you couldn't get money? How would you feed your family if you couldn't get a job or whatever? You would resort to things to help you get through it. Most people under torture would give names of their neighbors, their network. Most women gave other women's name. But the truth is, most witches were ordinary Christian women who found themselves accused of witchcraft by their neighbors or denounced by other suspects under torture. And everybody talks about, obviously, before as we're coming to the end of this, but witches celebrate Samhain, which obviously is October the 31st to November the 1st, which is the darker half of the year of Halloween. Also, Beltane, the 1st of May, where it's the beginning, you know, we're celebrating. And I, like you, Val, I celebrate Halloween. I light the candles, but I never forget the women and children and men and animals around the world that probably lose their life in rituals where they are sacrificed for, unfortunately, that particular belief and faith.
I do want to, you know, you talked about, you it was mostly women and
Hang on, Terry, you got to turn down the volume.
turn.
Turn down the volume. Go on.
You talked about, it was
You got to turn the volume down, Terry.
women and men, but the youngest person. Gotta cut your volume down, Terry.
Turn the volume down.
The youngest person to be accused of at the Salem witch trials was Dorothy Good.
Yep.
She was arrested and jailed in 1692 at the age of just 4 years old.
Mm.
Dorothy was accused of practicing witchcraft and confined to a dungeon-like prison for nearly 8 months. She was the daughter of Sarah Good. She was accused 3 weeks earlier, and then someone accused her daughter. So can you imagine being in a dungeon-like prison for 8 months with your 4-year-old, trying to keep you both alive?
That's an interesting one you bring up, because before we end the show, and I'll bring Terry in, next week we will be looking at the Pendle witches and the Salem witches. 2 very, very sad stories, true life stories. But I want to just bring in, before I bring the lovely Terry in, the last person in the United Kingdom. Oh my goodness.
There's Dorothy.
Bless her heart. The last person in the United Kingdom who was tried and executed for witchcraft was Janet Horne. In 1727, she and her daughter were arrested and jailed. Janet's daughter suffered from a deformity in her hands and feet, and neighbours gossiped that she looked as though she had hooves. And Janet was accused of turning her daughter into a pony to transport her around the countryside, to carry out witchcraft.
People are so stupid.
How awful. It was believed that hooves were proof of their witchcraft, and they remained in place of hands and feet because Janet had failed to completely return her daughter from pony to human form. Janet's options were very limited, her legal options, and her trial was rushed through. The sheriff deputy of Sutherland, it's weird, my family's from there, just found both Janet and her daughter guilty. And they ordered they should be burned to death the following day. Her daughter managed to escape, but Janet, perhaps showing signs of what could be seen today as dementia, was clearly confused by these events. She was tarred and feathered and paraded through Dornoch in a barrel. When she arrived at her execution place, Janet is said to have smiled and warmed herself at the very fire which was about to consume her. The stone that marks the site of Janet Horne's burning can still be seen in Littletown. Although the date on the stone, 1722, is wrong, it should read 1727. 9 years after her death, the Witchcraft Acts were repealed in Scotland and England, and it became unlawful to execute anyone for alleged witchcraft. I cannot begin to believe how they could burn a lady who obviously had dementia.
Yeah, but they saw it as, well, they used it as an excuse.
Yeah.
I mean, that's all that had to be. People are not that stupid.
Not only did they humiliate her by tarring and feather her, but even in 1944, Helen Duncan became the last woman convicted and imprisoned under Great Britain's Witchcraft Act of 1735. It's thought that Duncan emitted the ectoplasm, likely cheesecloth, mixed with other bits of paper, by regurgitating it, which was probably quite startling, in a dark room doing a seance. So here we are. We're now in, what was that, 1944. She was the last woman convicted and imprisoned. And In fact, according to believers, ectoplasm only survived briefly and disintegrated when exposed to light. Photographs of Duncan show long lengths of ectoplasm tumbling from her mouth, or more convincing, to eerie door-like figures that hover nearby. So she was actually imprisoned, and I know it was I think it was 1952 or 1956 before witchcraft was actually outlawed in the United Kingdom. So I'm going to bring Terry on now, which hopefully we can hear him better. Because if I don't know what it is, but you're getting a feedback, Terry, which we can't hear you from. So let's see how this works by bringing this in.
You got to unmute yourself, Terry.
Is it better?
That's better.
Well, no.
Well, not really. No.
All right, hold on. Let me get off this damn Bluetooth.
Okay.
How about now?
That's much better. Terry, welcome to Wicked Women. It's your first time here.
Talk about Wicked Witch of the East and Wicked Witch of the West. I don't know which one.
We're both equally wicked.
Yeah. Can y'all? I can't hear y'all now. I don't know whether it's my phone or what.
But we can hear you perfectly.
Oh, okay. But anyways, what I was going to say, I've only known of 2 witches, and both of them were white witches, white witchcraft. I met one who was, me and her boyfriend did a movie called Garden Generals, and I told him I was a paranormal investigator. He invited me back to his house, and come to find out, I went up there, and we got to going all over the place, and she could tell he'd have a walkie-talkie, and he could talk to her, and she could talk to the spirits, and they would tell her, and she would tell him where they were and all that kind of stuff. So it was
from
this happened
different places.
Yeah. Both of them. She was in the house, and we were up on the hill.
Yeah,
piddling around. Now, if this happened back in the old days, it'd be certain death.
Sure.
If something like it happened.
I'm sure it did. Of course, they didn't tell each other because they didn't have walkie-talkies.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I guarantee that women have said, they probably got a premonition. Or what is it? Something location. Where you can see a different location.
Yeah.
I'm sure they've had dreams of different locations that they've never been, or visions of them, and probably been too scared to tell anybody.
Oh, okay.
I know that we're talking about the lady that was one that was tried in 1944. She has still not been exonerated for being accused of a witch. Because why has she not? Why has she not been given that opportunity? Why have so many of the women that have been persecuted and accused of witchcrafts over the years, why have they not been exonerated?
Maybe it's because no one's defending them.
Well, she entered Holloway Prison, not exactly the best prison. It's a prison for women. But also as well, another one here it shows, I'm just reading about there's a picture here of the, if I can get this to open up, of her with the ectoplasm coming out of her mouth. It might not be able to open it now. But literally, another woman, 72-year-old medium Jane York, was fined £5 in September 1944, but saw no prison time. And it wasn't really till the 17th and 18th century that persecution and execution started to decline, and they stopped persecuting women. By then, they had done some terrible things to women. And unfortunately, there are certain countries in the world today that are still persecuting women and children and some men for being a witch. And they will still do exorcisms and other kinds of not very nice things to them. But they believe that there were 40 to 50,000 in total in Europe and the American colonies over 700 years. 40 to 50,000 were probably killed for being accused of being a witch. That to me is horrific.
Joan of Arc was burned for hearing voices. So, you know, she heard voices telling her to attack England. So, you know, or to attack the English, rather. So,
yeah,
I mean,
that thing you talked about.
burned.
I'm just finding that thumb and toe. That's right. One method to tell if someone was guilty was to tie their left thumb to their right toe and toss them in the water, such as the moat of Oxford Castle and prison. If they floated, they were guilty. If they didn't, they were innocent. I mean, I think I might have pretended to be dead for quite a while. So I
would have held my breath like nobody's business.
Yeah, because they'd be looking for the air button. They would hold you down. They would absolutely hold you down with the stick as well.
Wasn't there another thing, and I don't know what it's called, so forgive me, but it was a barrel, a big barrel full of water, and it had a cross symbol in metal on the top. Yep. They would raise it up, put the witch or the accused in it, close it, and lock it. It had a key lock on it. In order to save themselves, they would either have to look up at the cross. According to them, they couldn't lay their eyes on a cross.
They're still going to die, right? No matter what. Correct?
Well, no. If they looked up and looked at the cross, there was a place big enough for them to pull their head up and breathe. Okay. It's, you know how the cross is like this? Yeah. These empty places at the bottom of the cross, they could breathe because it was open.
Oh, okay.
But in order to do that, they had to turn their face up to the cross. And if you were a witch, you couldn't do that.
Yeah.
It's the first law in relation to witchcraft in England was not introduced until the reign of Henry VIII. And obviously we know that because he accused Anne Boleyn of using witchcraft. The trial of Eleanor Cobham, Duchess of Gloucester, there's a woman with power. In 1441, his famous example is under James I. This is this lovely gentleman here who was Mary, Queen of Scots' son, James VI of Scotland, and James I of Scotland. When he became King of England, he encouraged witchcraft trials in the England back then, I should say. The king was convinced a witch had cursed his fleet, causing them to face a terrifying storm while returning to Scotland from Denmark. And he made changes to the English Witchcraft Act that stirred up fear across the country. Accusations of witchcraft increased, creating more fear against the public, which then meant even more accusations against typically poor older women and animals, particularly anyone who had a cat, because they were considered familiars. And especially, obviously, at the time, you would know about this, the Puritan era, which is obviously when a lot of them came over to Virginia and the colonies as well over there, witch hunters, which I said we will look into next week. Matthew Hopkins being known as one of the famous ones. But so many women had horrific tortures. And James I was actually reported to have supervised the torture of some suspected witches himself. So this is the king of England, coming in, supervising the torture of these people. And it's the king. So it's got to be good. Using that one that Val gave you the example of the toe. However, obviously hanging, as we know, was the most popular one. The last documented execution for witchcraft apparently was 1682, while Jane Wenham was sentenced to hang in 1712. She was pardoned by Queen Anne. and fear of witchcraft still lingered throughout the United Kingdom, Great Britain. There were even instances of mobs attacking suspected witches. However, reverse witch trials emerged as those abused for suspected witchcraft reported those who attacked them to, they would basically not tell people, I was attacked. I was fine. Nothing happened to me, because they did not want it to go into a trial.
Right.
I think what hits me on all of this that we've done today, and I said this to Val earlier on tonight, the persecution of innocent women. And I'm not saying that every witch is innocent but it seems to be that women predominantly are seen in biblical, medieval, even in some ways present day, to be the troublemakers, the tempters.
They're always troublemakers.
We are, apparently.
Yes.
How you can
Now didn't witches have like orgies and all that kind of stuff?
Apparently, if you listen to popular belief, they did. But so do other religions, without me actually going into that. So do other religions as well.
They weren't nice. I mean, well, they were nice, but you know.
But I think in the UK alone, Scotland obviously had the ones. I can't even imagine the pain to be burnt at a stake, and everybody cheering you on to absolutely understand. Imagine someone taking you out of your home. Your family and friends can't stick up for you, because if they do, they will join you. Your animals may be taken from you and put next door to you to burn. So not only will you hear yourself screams, you will hear their screaming as well. And you will have people baying for your blood. They will be screaming and chanting and throwing things at you. It would be awful. And that would be your last memory of your life on this earth.
Even your children, because, I mean, Sarah Good, her daughter, 4 years old, she could have very well been tied up beside her.
Yes.
I mean, and you know, what bothers me more than the people that actually tied them to the stakes are the people that stood there and watched it and cheered.
Yeah.
That bothers me more than, you know, the people that were told to do it.
The saddest thing is that the youngest, I've just read this here, which is quite sad. The youngest witch or youngest person they believe who was killed, accused of witchcraft, was Dorothy Good, who was 4 or 5.
Yeah.
And she was hung. She was
Sarah Good's daughter.
Really?
Now next week we will
4 years old.
We will be looking at Salem. Val will be dealing with Salem.
Oh, okay.
And I will be looking at the Pendle witches, which is a very sad story. And if Carly is well enough, she'll be looking at the European witch trials, which are horrific. I kid you not. We wanted to do justice to these women because today women are still persecuted for being different or for having different faith or belief and whatever. Just persecuted for having a vagina sometimes, you know. We're persecuted. And we want to do these women justice because we are the great grandchildren.
We could very well be descendants from those that were hanging there.
I absolutely believe I come from that because most of the women in my family have had the gift and have practiced the craft. I hope everyone that watched the show tonight has actually got and perhaps a more better understanding of what happened, why witchcraft began, where it came from, who began it in the United Kingdom. At least from my side, obviously we know it's King James I, but also to have an understanding that when you next call someone a witch or you call them the name of the witch, what you're actually saying to them, because only up to 400 or 500 years ago, if you said that to someone else, they probably would have lost their life over it. So next week we will be looking at Salem. Val. That is going to be your one to look at.
Yep.
Okay.
And Pendle will be mine. And also, as I said, if Carly's not here, we'll then go on to the next one. But we will be looking at the Witchfinder General because we have to include him, Matthew Hopkins. But I just want to read before we go and say goodnight. There's a story I wanted to leave you guys with. It's not a particularly great one, but it's from Ireland. And Ireland is a country we've not brought up tonight, and yet Scotland's been there, and America and England. When Joanna Burke went to pay her cousin a visit, she found the 26-year-old being held down and force-fed a concoction of herbs and milk. The men restraining her were 3 of her brothers, an elderly neighbour, and her own husband. Bridget, who was a dressmaker and an egg seller from County Tipperary, had been taken ill and bedridden for a number of days. She'd remained under the care of her Michael, who had sent for a doctor in a nearby town, and of course a priest. By Thursday, she had March 14th, 1895. He had also sent for herbs gleaned from a witch doctor. By that stage, Michael Cleary was gripped by the belief that his wife was a malevolent fairy changeling. Where that came from, I do not know. According to a court report in the Irish Times on March 27th of that year, Joanna said the men forced Bridget to take the herbs, and Cleary asked, "Are you Bridget Boland, the wife of Michael Cleary, in the name of God?" She answered twice, but when she refused to answer a third time, she was hauled up and held in a sitting position over a slow burning embers of a kitchen fire. She seemed to be wild and deranged, especially when they were so treating her like this. She eventually responded, "I am Bridget Boland, daughter of Pat Boland, in the name of God," referring to her maiden name. The above story would form just one part of a series of violent acts against Bridget that would end in her death. And it's the testimony of the chief witness in a landmark case in which 8 people would be convicted for their roles in Bridget's abuse. Michael Cleary was 35 at the time, and was the 2 had been married for 8 years and had no children. According to 1995 analysis, this beliefs mean that the presence of the neighbour was the fact that these women were obviously all witches, or they were all in league with fairies and nymphs, etc. A fairy changeling, that could be a bad, negative spirit. And they would often take your place. They would jump into your body and take your place, and you would be abducted by the fairies. And in Ireland, they still believe in the little people, very much do.
Well, people would take their babies out into the forest if they didn't want them. They would take their babies and leave them under a tree for the fairies to take.
Yeah.
Obviously, the torture went on, and I won't go into it because some of it is very, very graphic. But it will say that he grabbed a hot stick from the fire and held it close to her mouth. Finally, he stripped her of her nightgown, doused her in lamp oil a number of times, and set her alight. "It's not my wife I am burning. I am not going to keep an old witch in place of my wife, so I must get back my wife." I can't even begin to the pain that she must have gone through.
Okay.
It's not Bridget I'm burning. You will see her go up the chimney. She was burning on the heath, and all you could smell was the smoke and the burning remains of Joanna. That was in the year, let's bring this up again. What year was that? 1895. This is what I'm saying. This is why we wanted to do this show, because it's really important that people realize that in today's society, in 2024, are we really believing these stories of witches and fairies and such like, or are we going to have a wider look of saying these are women that are tapping into nature, into energy, and manifesting, and into the law of attraction, actually? But unfortunately, education doesn't seem to come very quickly these days, does it?
I've got to run.
Bye, Terry.
I'll see y'all later. I'm still listening.
I think a lot of a lot of women were accused by men who they spurred. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
The men couldn't have them.
Do you have that little black kitten there? Do you have that little black kitten?
He won't come out from under the the
Because
bed.
I was going to say, you could. My one is not here. He's upstairs asleep. But it's like I've had all black cats because nobody wanted them, and they didn't want a home. Please give a home to a black cat. Please give a home to a black dog.
They're precious.
Black dog, black cat, black guinea pig, black rabbit, black rat, whatever it is. Please give a home to them. They aren't evil. It really isn't unlucky.
My black cat that I have, Bear, he's one of the sweetest cats I've ever had, and I've had cats since I was 4. He's one of the sweetest cats I've ever had.
Absolutely.
And he's coal black. And, you know, I've always wanted a black cat.
Mm.
Luckily, the cat I rescued had kittens, and one was black, solid. He was the first one. So
I had Merlin. I had Merlin. I had Magic. I had Midnight. I had Mischief and Mystery, and then now Vampire. But I don't know, there's many animal rescues out there who are desperate to find black cats and black dogs at home. Please do not be taken in by this old wives' tale that they are unlucky, because they are not. And I think, Val, that I hope that we've done some credit to these women and some of the stories.
I think over the next couple shows, you know, we'll achieve more. But yeah, I mean, you know, I hope that if nothing else, we make people see that, you know, these women were not evil, bad people. They were accused of something that they had no control over. You know, I have no control if I have a mole or a freckle.
No.
I mean, it's stupid. But, you know, they
also,
were accused.
We are aware that we haven't touched on the other side of witchcraft. Yeah. It doesn't mean to say we won't, but we just haven't done it for tonight.
Right.
Because there are those that do practice a completely different form of black magic, and obviously that is a completely different thing. But predominantly, most women were innocent, and I find it fascinating listening to your story about the lady in Virginia, how she lived to 80, and how in my own country they were still persecuting women, like for stuff.
I you know, I admire her just for her, you know, just for her spirit and her will.
Absolutely.
After going through all that, she went back home and she worked that land for years on, and she died on her own property, her own farm.
And a free woman.
Yeah.
The next time people watch things like Bewitched, Charmed, The Craft, Practical Magic, Hocus Pocus, and you see these women wearing the hat, having the besom, the cauldron, it perhaps open your mind to where these came from, why they're still being used in today's movies, and why witches. I mean, looking at Supernatural with Rowena, she's a Scottish witch. You know, she's obviously on the darker side of things. I think hopefully it would educate. That's all we want to do, is open the mind.
Yeah, we're not saying, you know, every witch is wonderful and, you know, everything like that. But there's two sides of it. Yes. It's not always, you know, the green wart hat, you know, evil. We don't all have flying monkeys.
For me, it would have been awful to see the animals taken, because they would actually put the animals in a wicker basket and then they would just keep that, you know, and a poor animal would be screaming. I mean, as human beings, we are the worst creatures. We are the worst monsters. And what we do to our fellow man.
If you really think about it, it's the opposite. You know, the people doing this stuff were the evil ones, and, you know, the women were the victims.
Yes.
I mean, that's just the, you know, heads and tails of it. They were accusing them of being evil, but what they did to them was pure evil.
Yeah.
In the name of
God.
You know, in the name of the church and in the name of, you know, their God. So
exactly.
You know,
and that name is thrown around so easily, isn't it? I mean, God's name is thrown around so easily. We used to have a comedian over here called, oh God, it's been a while since I thought of him now. It's on my Dave something, and he used to say, "May your God go with you," which means that whoever you practice and whoever you believe, all the best, all the best. So next week, Val, this week, tell us about some of the shows. What's going on?
Okay, you've got Scotty Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. I don't think he's with Intrepid anymore, but it's the radio show and the podcast. It's 10 p.m. Eastern, 9 Central. I don't know what time it is that you're over there. I'd have to add it up. Is it 5 in the morning?
It would be, if it's 10 o'clock at night, if it's 5 hours, it would be 3 o'clock.
Yeah, 3 o'clock. Robertson on Tuesday, which is, it's 5 o'clock Eastern, 4 o'clock Central, and
10 o'clock here.
10 o'clock. Ken, whenever he gets a wild hair, he's on Morning Coffee, 9 o'clock, whenever he decides to do it. I'm assuming he'll do it tomorrow morning because of what happened.
When he graces us with his presence, yes.
Miss Legends and Paranormal, that is me. See, I knew it. He'll be on tomorrow at 9. Miss Legends and Paranormal, which is me, on Saturday on my Facebook page at 7 p.m. Eastern. Is it 2 o'clock in the morning over to your house?
1 o'clock. 1 o'clock. Yeah,
1
so
o'clock.
it is. It's 1 o'clock. And you can make sure that people know where to find you. It's Valerie Rasnick.
Valerie Rasnick on Facebook. And it's not on YouTube. It's just my Facebook page.
And that'll be Saturday evenings. It will be actually 1 o'clock in the UK.
Yeah, it'll be 7 o'clock p.m. Eastern, 6 Central.
And Ken Ballos is also on Facebook, isn't he?
Yes. And Wicked Women's back next Sunday.
We will be.
5 Eastern, 10 UK, 4 Central, and 3 on the list.
Mountain.
Thank you.
Interesting before we leave. If you look at the figure that's behind us of our symbol for Wicked Women, it is the power of 3. We'll set you 3. And it is us as witches, myself and your good self, Carly, and Kay, obviously, because we have.
I meant to say it earlier. I have the conical hat on.
She does. Mine is slightly different, and also it's almost like Carly's one is pilgrim style, which is really, really interesting. And must thank the lovely Scotty Roberts who designed that for us. And we can
have the cups and the keychains. I'm at my daughter's house, so I didn't bring them with me.
There are Wicked Women mugs. They look amazing, and keychains as well. Yes. But we chose that, or rather, I chose it because obviously I wanted something that was just a little bit wicked. And I don't think actually I can bring it up anymore. I don't know if this will work. No, it won't. That's annoying. It won't let us do it. But you can see behind us are the 3. And we are very proud of our symbol. And we're very proud to be on, if you want to call us a witch, then that's a compliment.
That's right.
Thank you very much. Very proud to be, and of my ancestors too. It's been a really good show. It's a lot to cover.
It is a lot to cover, but you know, I think that's why we made it into 3 different sections.
Yeah.
So wherever we stop today, we will carry it on over next Sunday and then the next. So, you know, if you're interested in what we're saying, please come back next Sunday and watch us.
Like, share, subscribe.
Like, share, subscribe, comment, you know, do all those good things. Ring that notification bell. You know, all those things are free and it helps us out a lot.
I can tell you that we're actually getting people coming in from the Dark Huntress as well, which is obviously my YouTube site with the Impala. So thank you to everybody coming in from the Dark Huntress that's watching us, and joined us on Wicked Women as well, our YouTube channel, Wicked Women 888. They're also coming from my Facebook page and Val's as well. We're really grateful to everyone that's come along. We're still growing. We're still learning. I think our shows are getting better and better. We are going to cover a lot of subjects, a Ouija board. You know, as I said, we're doing Witchfinder General, Salem, Pendle, European. We also have another really good couple of shows coming up in, I'd probably say going into August now, where we are going to have a couple of special guests. And Val doesn't know about one of these, but literally one she does. There's 2 coming on, and it will be an amazing show. So we're getting there. And we hope that you will all take Wicked Women into your heart, because we all need a bit of wicked in our lives.
Absolutely. Who don't want a bit of wicked in their weekend?
Exactly. I mean, it's Sunday. What do you do apart from being wicked? So
what do you have better to do than be with us?
Exactly. Well, why would they want to do it? Why would they want to go anywhere else? I'm off to bed now. I have a very interesting week, so I'm off to bed. I will see. I will catch up with you in the week, Val. And obviously, Carly, get better. We hope you're back with us next week.
I will send you pictures of my grandkitty. So.
Absolutely. Look forward to it. In the meantime, Val, say your goodbyes, my darling.
Thank you, everybody, for watching. We really appreciate it. I hope everybody joins all of our other friends on their respectable positions.
Yep.
And come back and see us, please. And tell everybody that come watch Wicked Women. And let us know if there's anything you want us to talk about.
100%. Yes. Scotty Roberts, Ken Ballos, and the lovely Valerie Rasnake, my partner in Wicked. They have some amazing shows. Really go and watch them. Myself and Scotty on Tuesday. I have no idea what we're going to talk about. We were supposed to do this Tuesday, but Scotty couldn't do it. So it will be a very quick show this week, that's for sure, if I do it, because I'm having a slight procedure done on Wednesday. So it's very, very quick.
Everybody say a little prayer for Wendy.
Thank you, honey. Please, everyone send out good thoughts for me on Wednesday. In the meantime, I love you, Val. Thank you so much. Thank you for everyone who's joined us. Take care of yourselves and each other. And if you can't be good, just be wicked.